Hi, and thanks for joining today's webinar, Customer-centricity in Market Research. My name is Dina Otero, and I'll be today's moderator. Just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, so the recording will be shared with all of our attendees via email, and our speakers will also answer any questions that you have about the content. So we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so feel free to submit your questions in the chat window on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and we will flag them throughout the presentation and save them till the end. So today we're joined by Ray Poynter, founder of NewMR, and Holly DeMuro, Director of Marketing here at Confirmit. Ray has spent the last 35 years at intersection of innovation, technology, and market research, during which time he's held director-level positions with companies such as Vision Critical and Vision Surveys. So we're very excited to have him join today, and so with that, I'd like to pass it on to Ray.
Hi, thank you, Nina. Wonderful introduction, and I look forward to speaking with everyone here today. So I'm going to start things off, and then Holly will join me. So I'm going to talk about customer centricity and market research. What does customer centricity mean? Why is it so important? Where is it taking us? And here is the agenda. We don't need to worry too much about that. I'm going to follow that process through. You might want to look at it when you come back and look at the slides and the notes at a later date. The customer centricity revolution, why has it happened? Well, I'm going to go back to the 20th century, and in the early to late 20th century, most marketing was around product differences. The absolute typical television advert was two housewives in a kitchen talking about Delta for Procter & Gamble, where Delta was an actual product difference. So most marketing was around product differences. And this eroded over time, and we've ended up with product parity. It's really hard now for somebody to come along with a product that is actually better or faster or quicker or cleans deeper than anybody else's product. So the marketing had to move on. And the next step in the late 20th century was supply logistics. Having the best manufacturing in the best countries for manufacturing, having the best method of assembling those parts, having retail outlets in the best sites. We saw a lot of geolocation work to make sure that retailers were in exactly the right place, where things exactly in the right place within the retailer. All of these factors. But over time, of course, we got supply chain parity. So we've got product parity, we've got supply chain parity. What's left? Well, the last best chance for businesses to grow is customer centricity. People have to think about the product as being their product. It has to have what Byron Sharp in his book, How Brands Grow, talk about mental availability. People have to think about your product. There are now numerous books. Here's one from my friend Denise Dumundrun on customer centricity. We need to really get into the mode of customer centricity, and it's vitally important. Here's a great example. Electronic Arts voted the worst company in America in 2012 and 2013. Of course, they weren't the worst company in America by any imagination, but they were highly exposed because their customers were online gamers, and they are really vocal in terms of online polls for the worst company. So they turned themselves around in 2012 and said, we are going to be a player-first organization, which is what customer centricity means to Electronic Arts. And if you look at that green curve, what happened is shareholder value went up and up and up. By focusing on being customer-centric, they delivered shareholder value. They delivered a financial return. Probably the best example of customer centricity that most of us will come across is Amazon and Jeff Bezos. So why is the chair there? He has got a reputation of, when he has a meeting with senior people at Amazon, of putting an empty chair in the room and say, imagine the customers in that chair. They're listening to what we say. What are we saying to them? What do they think about what we're saying to each other? How can we be customer-centric? And there are 5 pieces of advice which have been generated out of the Amazon, and they are repeated numerous times in numerous places. And I'm going to share those 5 pieces of advice with you if you want to be the planet's most customer-centric company. The first is you've got to bake customer service in. You can't add customer service as an afterthought or as an extra or as a piece beyond. It's got to be fundamentally at the heart of the organization. The second is everybody's got to be involved. It's not just the customer success manager. It's not just the frontline staff. It's the IT team have to be thinking about customers. The HR team have to be thinking about customers. The finance team, everybody needs to be thinking about customers. You've got to be accessible. Customers have to be able to tell you that you're not delivering the right service. They need to be able to feed information back to you. That information has got to get to the most important people, whoever they may be. The most important person one day may be the chief executive. Another day, it may be the pizza delivery boy or girl who's actually delivering that pizza who has to make a customer-centric decision. So that information has to be accessible. Then there has to be a feedback loop. It's not enough to listen to customers. If it's really going to be customer-centric, you've then got to feed back to customers to say, thanks for telling us that, we are doing this. Or sometimes, I understand why you're asking for that, but we can't do it, and here's the reason. That will win you a lot of brownie points compared with simply not telling people what's going on. And finally, accountable. Now, to be accountable, you have to measure things. You have to know what your performance is like for customers. That information needs to be accurately collected, accurately shared amongst the organization. People who are not delivering against customer centricity need to know that they are going to be held accountable for that. And the people who are delivering against customer centricity need to know that they will be held accountable and rewarded for that. So let's move a bit into our world, the market research world, and think about these people that we used to call respondents. Increasingly, we're calling them market research participants, which is better, but it misses the fundamental point, because most of the people that we do surveys with, most of the people that we do focus group discussions and depth discussions and all these other things that we do in market research are our clients' customers. The vast majority of market research now is done with customers. We see that obviously in customer satisfaction, but actually new product testing, new concept testing, advertising tracking, brand tracking. Most of these are either entirely with customers or they are focused on customers. So when we send out those really tedious, boring surveys, we're thinking we're boring respondents. We're not. We're boring our clients' customers. And that is not tenable in a customer-centric world. So what do we need to do? We need to respect customers. And the first element of that is not to bore customers. So we can't just ask every question we would like to ask in the way we would like to ask it, because that is simply going to be too tedious and too boring. We don't want to say, okay, thinking about your busy day, I'd like you to divide it up into 10-minute sections and tell me what you were doing in each of those 10-minute sections. So tedious. We can't overwork customers. Sometimes we will ask them to do something which is potentially fun, like please take a photograph of every meal and drink you consume. But that's a bit time consuming, so we might want to do that just for one day. On the other hand, if we're saying to them, we would like to see a photograph of your breakfast, that's not so onerous. We could ask them to do that for a week or for 2 weeks. So we can balance the workload around so we're not overworking our customers. Don't ignore customers. So frequently when we're doing market research with them, they will tell us about some problem they're having that is not connected with this research project. We need to make sure that we don't just say, sorry, that's not to do with this project, that we make sure that message gets to the right people through the system. we mustn't dictate to customers. We can't tell them which device they should use, and we shouldn't be insisting that they describe themselves in the following way. One of the changes I've noticed in surveys recently, and it's a good change, is that we're seeing the gender question going from being just male-female to being male-female other, e.g. transgender. Now, the percentage of people who classify themselves as that other is going to be very small in most research surveys, but it shows respect to our customers, to our clients' customers, if we think about how people want to be classified. Do provide choices, so different ways of doing things, different times, different devices. Do listen. We don't always listen when we collect information from people. Collecting information can often be a taking process, and we need to enhance that so it's a listening process. So let's think about those widening choices. Sometimes you'll see a debate that says, oh, we want people to do it on a PC because we want to use these big images, we want to use these big grids. But really, that shouldn't be our choice. We should find the right way to ask questions that works on the smartphone, on the tablet, on the small tablet, on the large tablet, on the desktop and on the laptop. We want those choices giving to our clients, customers. Also, time of day. Can people take this survey? Can they engage in this qualitative exercise any time of the day, or are we trying to insist it must be done at this time? Can they stop it and start it again later? What channels are we communicating? Email is going really out of date for many, many people. Some older people, SMS works. Other people, you want Messenger. In Japan, you want to be using Line. In China, you want to be using WeChat. All of these different channels so that we're communicating with people in ways that they choose. Closed and open questions. People sometimes want to answer closed questions, sometimes they want to answer open. We should facilitate both. Maybe they want to answer using voice. Maybe they want to answer using some video or uploading images. We want to facilitate those. We want to facilitate web for some people. Other people want to use web but via an app, and sometimes an app with no web at all, because not everybody has internet connection all the time. So let's look at all of those options to see how we can widen choices. We love collecting in-the-moment data as researchers. And in the past, we used to ask people to do things like, well, when you bought that bottle of Coke, what was going through your mind? And what product did you buy before that one? Oh, you bought a cherry Coke 3 months ago. Okay, what were you doing then? It's an impossible question. It's onerous. It's not respectful. So what we're seeing now are more and more people focusing on collecting that data as people are out and about, as they're traveling, as they're shopping, as they're in the food market, collecting information in a way that is better for us as researchers, but it's much more customer-centric. It's part of their life. And we can make it less onerous by automating the collection of data. Passive information, so with people's permission. Customer-centric research is all about permission. We can see that people have traveled here, they have stopped here, they have used their phones in the following sorts of ways. Collaborative research is a really interesting growth area. Diaries, of course, are really, really well established. They've been around for many years before modern technology. And that was a collaborative research because we were not there. We asked the customers to collect a record of what they were doing. We can make that so much better now with smartphone-enabled diaries. Mobile ethnographies, where we ask people to collect small videos and stories and vignettes from their life. Customer-initiated feedback. More and more times, customers say, yeah, I want to be able to tell you that something is happening. I don't just want to respond to requests. Sometimes we see that really customer-centric people are enlisting customers to act as detectives, to go out there and to find things, to try things, to become message information people. and crowdsourcing, where we ask people to collaborate. Who can find the best solution? Who can find the best idea? Forms of collaborative blogs, online discussions where people are feeding back on each other's information. All of these things are collaborative research where customers are helping co-create the future of the brand. And then we absolutely have to close the feedback loop. We need to tell people, you suggested this and we have done this. We have followed it up in the following way. We have tried to do this. We've reduced our energy consumption. We've improved our green footprint. We have dealt with diversity in the following way. We've increased responsiveness. We've decreased the response time. All of these sort of things, we have to feed that process back. We need to travel that journey. So the brand has a journey that it wants to go on. The customers have a journey. We need to respect both journeys. We need to try to get a symbiotic process that's going to be shaping customer-centric market research by really respecting individuals, looking at where they're going and following that process through. So the big picture. Research should engage customers, not alienate them. It's got to be a much more pleasant process. It's something we're doing with our clients' customers. They've got to say, oh, I am so glad that I was given the chance to input my feelings. And then I got a response back. And now I can see the brand is operating in a different way. It's a value exchange. People who take part in market research, customers who take part in market research, should think that they got as much out of the process as we did. That is what we need to be striving towards in a customer-centric way. So it means using all devices. We can't go back to those days of saying, we want you to use this PC. Or I received a survey only yesterday in the UK which said, turn your phone round into landscape to do this survey. Well, maybe I don't want to. Maybe it's not convenient with where I am at the moment. How can we make sure that people who don't have access to the internet at this time can still take part in this activity? How can we ensure that the workload isn't too much? We want to make sure that people are being rewarded, and that doesn't always mean money, that they are not being overloaded so that they will continue to be happy customers. Raise the engagement. Now that might mean gamification. It might mean just changing the style a little bit. So we're going to be collaborating with the customers to help co-create the brand, and we're going to be closing that feedback loop. So that is the big picture of what's happening right across the research industry, and the research industry is following brands, because brands are driving customer centricity. This isn't a market research drive. Brands are driving customer centricity. Market research needs to be following that. And with that, I'm just going to hand over to Holly, who can talk about some of the ways that you can do that.
Thanks so much, Ray. That was absolutely fabulous. I'm sure everybody got lots and lots out of it. I know I did. I really walked away really amazed by that part of the presentation. The one thing that sometimes I find with some presentations is that, you get such amazing advice like what Ray just gave us, and then it can sort of be a little bit difficult to actually enact. Or you think you're doing it all, but maybe you're not. What other opportunities exist? What does the world look like? So when we walk away and look at Ray's big picture again, I changed the branding up a little bit, but this is the exact list you just saw on Ray's slide. All devices, with or without the internet, reduced workload, raise engagement, collaborate with your customers to help create the brand. Close the feedback loop. What does that mean in reality? How does that actually play out? How should we be using these opportunities, and how can we make sure that our research is better and that our customers and our customers' customers are going to be happier? So I want to spend just the next few minutes sort of diving through these. And we're going to start with that concept of the all devices and sort of mingle in with the with or without internet. And of course, we're going to move through with the raise engagement and collaborate with customers, because especially in that area, I think we get to certain question marks like, okay, how do you collaborate with customers to help build your client's brand? understand what does that even mean. But there are ways to do this, and we're going to talk about those now. So the first thing I think kind of sets a good tone for us is if we look at what devices people are using. Obviously, we want to be responsive to what the customers, what the respondents need. And you can see, trends over the last few years are showing us that there is obviously still a market for desktop, but mobile has not only now outstripped desktop, but on top of it, the year-over-year change is pretty intense. 30% year-on-year change, and now 50% of the global digital time is being spent on mobile devices. So, mobile may seem like something where, we're doing mobile surveys, that's enough. But I think the question really boils down to, are you doing the right mobile surveys? Are you using the right channels on mobile? It's definitely not something that can be ignored. And of course, at 45%, neither is web. Web is still a really significant thing. So we're going to spend some time now diving in specifically to those two specific channels. Let's start with the desktop world. What does that mean? Well, when we're talking about, for example, data collection through the desktop, you're pretty well going to be considering probably a web survey. But again, what are you missing? What are the chances that you're doing something with Web Intercept right now? And that may seem, well, that's kind of not our area. We don't do that. But why not? There is a tremendous amount of data that could potentially be pulled and drawn from the customer's, your client's website. And it's something that, again, in market research is just often overlooked. Different information that can come from a website intercept, for example, might be how the website is being used, whether people are satisfied, why are they abandoning their cart if it's something like a retail organization. And this is all done with, ultimately it's a pop-up. It's something that pops up on the screen or can be triggered at certain points. It can alternatively be a button, a feedback button that's stored on the website. So there's many different ways where this information can be pulled, but think about how great that looks to the customer, how much information that provides back to you, and how that can then be beautifully combined with feedback that you're getting in other channels in order to create a broader, more holistic picture of the customer's customer, of your client's customer. It's a tremendous amount of information with, again, many different ways that you can actually target this information. So, it's not some obtrusive, obnoxious pop-up. Everybody hates pop-ups. We never want to do that, of course, but it can pop up onto the screen, but it can happen at set intervals that give you the ability to control how it's popping up, give your client the ability to control that as well, and start to feed really detailed, deep information back to your research project, and also providing the customer with a feeling that they're cared about. People love to provide feedback. Contrary to popular opinion, they love to provide their feedback. They like to be heard. They like to know that they're being heard. So if you're using something like a web pop-up in such a way as to be able to record the appropriate information and then popping it up at the right time. So for example, maybe a specific route through the website. You want to see what people are thinking at that point after following a certain route through different pages. The information that you're collecting, first off, is non-obtrusive because as far as following the customer through the website, that's not something that the customer has to actually provide the data on. That's being collected in the background. And then all they have to do is ultimately answer a couple of quick questions. So it's easy, it's quick, and in the end, just cutting right down to the bottom of the secondary list there, what this really does is this keeps that negative feedback that the customer may be writing on social media about your client, keeps it off of social media. And that's a really big thing because the customer feels that they've been heard and they've been able to give their opinion and their voice without having to go broadcast it to the broad universe. So you're looking at a very customer-centric way of collecting data. It's easy. It's, like I said, a few questions. You're collecting all that background data without the customer ever having to put in, tremendous amount of work. You're collecting all of that necessary information, getting their feedback, and making them happy at the same time. So like I said, not always broadly used in terms of market research, but boy, oh boy, the possibilities and the potential applications are monstrous. So now when we started, the other side of the coin to this was mobile. Now mobile is, again, it was actually outstripping desktop in terms of digital time spent. So let's talk about mobile for a minute because mobile is a really big topic. You might be using mobile today. Many people are. There are lots and lots of, say, mobile surveys and so on, but are you using all of the opportunities that are available to you? Are you using the ones that are most customer-centric? Because remember, when we're talking about customers, we're talking about the respondents. They're one and the same, as Ray pointed out to us. So if we look now, what are the ways we're getting it on mobile? Well, if somebody's going to take a mobile survey, they're probably either doing mobile web or they're going to be on some app, right? And obviously the mobile web can be a link that's coming through SMS, it could be coming through email, any variety of ways it's being delivered to that mobile phone. Ultimately, it could lead them to a mobile web. It could also lead them to an app. Now, time and again, especially in the research world, less so I feel in the corporate world, but in research the feedback is nobody wants to download an app. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, and here's why. When we look at the way people are actually using their phones, their smartphones, we see that at the top of the list is app. So again, digital time spent when they're on that phone, they're on an app. So I question whether that's really a legit concern. If nobody wants to use an app, well, the numbers don't show that. And your numbers, people, you're researchers. This should mean something to you. But what's even more significant than that? This is obviously pretty cool. 50% of digital time spent is on a smartphone app. That's awesome. But let's take it one step further. And what I think is really exciting as well is when we look at the demographics associated with those people, look at who the biggest user of smartphone apps are. They're your millennials. You're hard to reach. The ones that are more difficult to get. You're not going to get these guys on the phone. I've got nearly an 18-year-old daughter, and I can tell you, I don't think she knows how to use a phone. Period. I don't think talking is a thing for children anymore. So you're not going to get them by many other means because they're sitting there playing on apps all the time. That's their thing. So you have an ability here not only to reach a very broad audience because people love their apps, but also to get in touch with that more difficult, challenging to reach demographic that everybody wants to get in touch with. Now, I understand, if you're thinking, well, if you're going to do one single survey, who's going to download the app? That's not going to happen. People download apps for repeated use, right? Well, yes, obviously, and there is opportunity for repeated use, obviously, in many cases where you're doing many studies or have somebody as part of your panel. But what about people who, just need to take the survey? Well, the beauty is you can kind of combine the idea of the app and the web. And that's a fun little tidbit that many people don't think about. So I'll just kind of play through this. And this is great for things like, obviously, one-off surveys, multiple surveys, diaries, ethnographies, et cetera. This is a great opportunity for any variety of different types of studies. And this is sort of that marriage between that concept of mobile web and app, which is fabulous in my opinion. So this is something that we've done recently at Confirmit that just sort of, again, marries it really, really well. So you send the customer a survey link like you normally would, and when they get to that first page of the survey, the customer gets to make the choice. Or let me change that, the respondent gets to make the choice. Now the beauty about that is, again, you're empowering your respondent. You're letting them make the decision whether they want to engage with you long term, whether you're worthy of an app. You're giving them the convenience of the app, and the app is a beautiful thing because once you have the app, you have the online-offline capability, which is something else that Ray was pointing out to us before. If people don't want to use their data, data is expensive, we all know that. If they happen to be, getting on the subway or the train and they're going to lose connectivity or they're going into a store, online-offline is a thing. That's kind of important to be able to take those surveys offline, and that's the beauty of the app. But of course, if they don't want to, they don't have to. They can still use the web survey. It's an option. But again, it's that marriage of the opportunity to take it on the web or download the app and then use it in an online-offline capability. And of course, with all that, you're still giving them that engaging and convenient ability to be able to pull in rich media, to pull in images and pictures and audio and so on and so forth. And of course, as well, GPS information. And this is all that background data that Ray was talking about before, where you don't have to ask them where they are, and you don't have to wait 6 months and ask them what they had for breakfast 6 months ago. You've got that real-time information that's automatically being saved and protected so that you, as the researcher, are able to use that data without irritating the customer or respondent, and without having to make them do that extra work and really struggle to get additional information that you need on your behalf. So it goes a little bit further than this, because the universe doesn't begin and end with surveys either. Surveys are a really great thing. We know how important they are to the research process, but of course you've got that larger group who are your panelists. And what about them? Are you conveniencing your panelists? Do they have a mobile app? Do they have the ability to do a mobile web instead? Can they do either or? Are they able to do what they need to do from their phone, whether it's take a survey that might have been pushed to them, whether it's update their profile? You want to talk engagement. Engagement is making it easy for somebody to go ahead and jump into their app and go deal with their mobile profile. Go look if there's new surveys. Go see if they've got enough accrued for whatever the rewards are. Enough points accrued for whatever the rewards are. So this starts to create that larger engagement picture that goes beyond just the survey. It really starts to pull them into something that's more engaging, more community-esque. Obviously, I don't want to confuse with a real community or with a community, because we're talking panel here, but it definitely starts to pull them in to be part of something bigger when you're making it convenient for them. And again, that decision to allow them to choose, do I want mobile web or do I want an app, is a big deal. And allowing them to do it conveniently is huge. Now, something that I think is pretty significant as well, probably more significant than anything else that we've talked about today, a really monstrous consideration is now we've talked about how surveys are being collected. We've talked about, well, what if they're a panelist? Well, I think one of the bigger things to think about is how people are actually using their phones, their mobile phones today. And it's an interesting dynamic that's sort of emerged in, probably the last 10 years or so. I remember back in the 80s we had mobile phones. Remember, for those of you who are old enough, you'll remember they were like the size of a small house, and you couldn't actually carry them, and the reception was terrible, but they've been around for a long time. But now mobile phones are convenient, they're easy, and they facilitate so many different aspects of our lives. My phone is sitting next to me right now, and I'll bet you about 90% of you have a phone within 10 feet of you, at the max, maybe within 10 inches of you. Why? Because it's our entire world. Everything is on there. And what we're starting to see is a really significant shift in mobile, where we've started to see that the mobile world that we've just spent the last few minutes talking about and the physical world don't really have a whole heck of a lot of a divide anymore. My whole existence is being facilitated by my phone. If I go to the airport, I'm going to pull up my plane ticket on my phone. I'm going to check my schedule on my phone. If I go to a local retail store and I really like that, whatchamacallit, whatever the device is, but is it good? Have other people complained about it? Let me just jump on and check the reviews real quick. There's my phone. I can go into a retail store and sort of wave my phone over what used to be a credit card machine, and magically money is deducted from my bank account to pay for objects I'm buying. We're in a whole different universe now, where digital and physical are constantly being merged together. And this goes back to that same concept as Ray was talking about before, where we talk about that idea of engagement, not boring the customers, that in the moment. Because my in the moment is with my phone. Collecting data is in the moment, and we want to do it in the moment. So how do we bring that together? Now, Ray kind of tipped on it a little bit before where he was talking about GPS, but we can take it one step further. GPS is huge. You've got people that are already using their GPS all the time. Okay, the GPS is on for most of us at all times, or at least the location service is on for most of us at all times, and that allows you then to be able to trigger feedback requests. in real time, at the time when the customer is doing whatever they're doing. So they walk into the store, you want to ask them a survey as they're entering. Maybe they walk out of a store, you want to ask them an exit survey. Maybe as they're moving around through the store, you want to ask questions. However, you want to see what their path is up through the store, or what the path to purchase is. How did they get from that front door to that cash register? What happened in between? Imagine the quality and the quantity of data that you could get from something like that. So that's when we start to get into going beyond GPS, and GPS is fabulous. And of course, this can be something that triggers surveys. This can be something that's recorded in the background and ultimately triggers surveys later as well. But then you've got one step further, and that's beacon. Now, beacons are fabulous little devices that you can actually place in a store, for example, or in a location. And again, you can see what people are doing inside where GPS might not be quite so specific. So GPS, for example, would tell me that I'm on, right now I'm in New York City on 29th and 7th. And it can get that specific, even maybe to the address, but it can't tell me where in the physical building I'm located. Beacon can. So with the beacons, again, a little device placed throughout a retail store, for example, or a bank or wherever else, you are able to then see where the person is indoors, up to a few yards and as small as a few centimeters away from where that beacon is located. Now, that device not only would have the ability to feed back and record, for example, like a path to purchase or somebody's movement throughout the store, but it could also, again, prompt a survey. Now, when we flash back for a second to what Ray was saying. He was talking about don't bore your customers, do it in the moment. Don't ask them questions that you can collect the data on. You've got all that covered right here by using technology that we have readily and easily available today, GPS and beacon. These are not difficult to use things and can easily be used to pull in that information, engage the customer, make them feel like they are providing the feedback that they want to provide. And again, that can be open-ended questions, it can be closed questions, but you're not asking them the dumb questions. Where are you? How old are you, or what device are you using? You don't need to ask those questions because that's going to be pulled automatically through these types of tools, and of course the information that would be stored in your panel as well. So it really helps to kind of tick some of these boxes, the not overworking and the don't bore your customers and so on. And the applications are monstrous, especially as we're talking about beacon and location. And beacon, I get a little bit kind of nerdy about it at times because I really think it's the coolest thing ever because of the possibilities. It spans across industries. I think I used a couple of retail examples, which is it's pretty low-hanging fruit, but the truth of the matter is it can be used in a gazillion different ways. So you can use it in a bank. Somebody goes in and they happen to be in the bank, maybe near the teller is the beacon. You can find out how their service was with the teller. Or, the same could hold true for the loan officer or whatever the case is. Maybe you want to just do something again as they're exiting the bank. What was your experience like? In the airport, about waiting times, about, how long or how things are selling. I heard one interesting example from one of our customers where they were actually tracking things in an airport, and it was sort of a combination of really cool things. Because they had the online-offline support, using the app, they were able to record all of the necessary information. These were researchers, mind you, going out, not customers specifically, but the researchers were able to go and use the offline data capture to be able to record what they needed through an airport. Now add on to that the possibility of beacon, where you can actually see where products are, product placement is. So the one that I was referring to a moment ago was specifically product placement as it related to flight patterns. And how people were retrieving or accessing alcoholic beverages while they were waiting for delayed flights. That was the research study. I know I described it in a little bit of a clunky way, but I think you can kind of get the idea. So it's a pretty cool concept. So now you add on to that the opportunity that they don't have to sit there, the researcher doesn't have to sit there and wonder, well, is my Wi-Fi going to hold up, or am I using tremendous amounts of data? Because obviously they wanted to capture images and, interview people, so there were audio files and stuff. It could be a lot of data. So they don't want to do that. Wi-Fi in the airport, I'm sure you all know, is the most unreliable thing in the universe. So now they're able to store all that and then upload it later when they have a better internet connection. And again, you can even add on to that and be using something like a Beacon product where the product placement is then recorded on an automatic basis for them. So really gets into some really powerful areas where you can sort of, pull all that data together, minimize the amount of actual input in order to just automate the process of retrieving that data. And I've also heard many situations where this is used in terms of mystery shops, and there was one that I'd heard of, a hotel that was actually doing room audits to make sure, I guess, all the furniture was still there after somebody checked out, make sure it was clean and so on and so forth. So there's so many potential applications for this. And again, the quantity and the quality of data without having to overwork your researchers or without having to torment the customer, the end customer who might be answering these surveys, is absolutely unbelievably amazing. So the last little piece that I kind of want to zoom in on for a second, Ray had mentioned as well, and that was about closing the loop. And one thing that I've heard time and again on the research side, is that researchers say, well, our job is to go in and we collect the data, we do our magic with the numbers, we provide you with what the situation is. We tell you what the data says. That's our job. We don't make you do something about it. And I get it. I understand that is kind of what you do. The challenge becomes that, unfortunately, your clients don't necessarily see the universe that way. And even though, yes, it does make sense that you would hand them a report, there have been numerous references. Matter of fact, I think it was something in Green Book in their quarterly report that I had read, obviously last quarter, where they were saying that more and more research buyers are now demanding a more consultative approach, more assistance coming from the research firm. That's what they're looking for. That's what they're demanding. And of course, in the same time, research budgets are shrinking. They don't feel like they have to pay because they feel like they're not getting enough. So, I get that it really isn't the research world to have to close the loop, quote unquote. But at the same time, if your clients are demanding it because they're getting pressure from the end customer, it kind of does become your problem, because your customer, your client, is going to begin feeling like they're not getting enough from the research that you're providing. And you end up getting blamed, regardless of whether it is or is not part of what you typically do, you end up getting the blame. So there's still a tremendous business case around doing something to facilitate action, to whether not that you have to personally call back every single customer and who's put in a complaint. Maybe that's something that you just push over to your client to do entirely, but maybe you can do something to facilitate it. You can help them. You can kind of make that closing the loop an easy thing that they're going to automatically do as a natural extension of the research process. Some different things that can be done. There are many opportunities where you can turn that research into something that facilitates closing the loop for your customer, and you can provide that value add. This is a business opportunity for you. A lot of you, if you're from a larger firm, you may be up against little agile boutique firms who are doing really cool, snazzy stuff. Maybe you need something to compete with. This is that business opportunity. Maybe you are one of those boutique agile firms, and congratulations, that's awesome. But now you have the big firms that I just gave them a tip on how to compete with you, so now you better listen up too. So what can you do? There's a few things. You can take all of this data and push it out to a variety of different places that can help to facilitate action. So if we think in terms, for example, like a dashboard. Dashboards are great. If you push a dashboard out to your clients where they can see what is that real-time feedback, what are people saying, not only does it save you time and effort and pain associated with, building reports in PowerPoint and maybe Excel and so on and so forth, it gives them the information quickly, rapidly, and allows them to do something about it. And the beauty of dashboards is that they can be interactive. So you can design a dashboard in such a way as to make your client want to drill in, want to take that next step, and want to figure out what can I do to fix it. And of course, tailoring the specific dashboards to the roles of the people who are going to be viewing those dashboards is even better, because you start to give them the specific information that they actually can act on, that they actually have within their area of control. So really powerful way to do it. But maybe dashboards aren't your thing. That doesn't stop. That doesn't stop your ability. You can push reports out. So that people are getting maybe, an email, say, once a week, once a day, whatever the case may be, whatever the need is, in any format you can begin to imagine. Again, because we're still kind of working in the same reporting world, you can still have them based on the different roles and the different needs of the people in the organization. But it's not real time. That's its downfall. But it still is an option. You're still pushing the information out to people quickly. And the key to closing the loop is to do it quickly. A customer does not find it amusing if they give you feedback and have to wait 6 months for you to say, "Oh, sorry about that. That's not okay." Real time, or at least really, really quickly, is the key. An add-on to that, or beyond that, another option beyond the dashboards and the reports is to consider alerts, where you can just have a note going out to the necessary people. Maybe something goes out to, say, the call center in your client's organization. Hey, got bad feedback on this. So those alerts that are actually being triggered in real time by the data that's being provided. So the data is coming into your instance of your research platform, and that data is immediately triggering an alert to the necessary person to be able to act on that. Beyond that, obviously data feeds. So maybe you have businesses who are working outside of, or working in their own business system. Maybe they have a CRM in place or something like that. You can also push those same kind of data points or data elements or alerts over into another platform as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities. And like I said, for you, it's a business opportunity. For your customer, it makes you look like you're giving them something bigger and better and bolder and greater than the competition. For your customer's customer, you're giving them an easy solution. You're giving them what they need. You're letting them provide the feedback that they want to provide in a format that is convenient for them to provide it in the time when it actually makes sense to provide it. All of that is easily accessible by just simply leveraging the right technology. And with that, I think we're getting close to Q&A, question and answer time. So I thank you all for having spent the last nearly hour with Ray and I, and we're happy to answer any of your questions. If you have not yet, please do go ahead and put those questions into the chat box over on the side of your screen, and we'd be happy to talk about anything you'd like to talk about.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Ray. Okay, so let's dive right into the questions because we have about 12 minutes left, and there are quite a few. So, Ray, why don't we circle back with you for the first one? The first question for you is, there are some types of surveys, such as brand trackers, that work well on computers but not smartphones. Is it okay to leave these as a computer or tablet only?
I don't think so. I think that if you do that, you are narrowing down your representation. So in particular, if you want millennials and you want to understand real millennials, then if you only interview those millennials who are happy to do a PC-based survey, you're doing a really skewed sample. They'll have the right demographics, the right age, maybe even the right income group, but they won't be representative. So we've actually got to break out of that thinking and say, what do we really need to discover? How can we change our thinking about surveys, our thinking about questions, so they fit? There will be a handful of things, not the really big things like the trackers and the customer satisfactions, but things like testing the covers of magazines, which will require a larger screen. And for those, we need to look at the social research world, where they've created representative panels, where they have made a tablet available to everybody on the panel. And for those projects that require representative samples, that's how they do it. And that's what we'll need to see for those few virtual reality, big screen issues. But for everything else, no, we should be rethinking it in a way that works on all devices.
Okay, thank you. Holly, next question is for you. Do you think the use of AI in data collection for market researchers is making it more customer-centric or away from customer centricity?
Okay, so it's an interesting question. So I think, probably where you're going with this is wondering mostly about the big data, because I think once we get to a level where we start talking about AI, it's a bit more of an outcome kind of thing, where you've actually analyzed the data and the artificial intelligence has led you to a solution. So I think you're probably more focusing on the big data concept, but I can kind of touch on both. So as far as starting with the big data idea, I think it has the potential to do either, in all honesty. Yes, it absolutely can be extremely beneficial and extremely useful in being able to cut out some of the bogus questions. It really is a lot to send a customer or a respondent, as it were, a survey that is going to take them 45 minutes or an hour or more. That's a lot to ask. And that was, a big component of what we were talking about today. The more information you're able to collect from those external sources, from the way they're using things today, so if maybe you're going to pull some Alexa data or Google Home or whatever, if that's available and you're able to pull that and use that data, see how the person's reacting, see what their day-to-day activities are, and then be able to merge that together with data that you've collected in other ways, it's fabulous. But it doesn't necessarily replace the need to interact with the customer. You can only assume so much before you are moving away from customer centricity. Because there are also situations, there are many situations where a customer behaves, or a respondent, or whatever the correct term is, they respond or react in a way that is in direct relation to what they're given. So, I'm going to go to, for example, I've got a Duane Reade across the street from me right now. If I needed a box of tissues, I'm probably going to go to Duane Reade because it's across the street. Not because it's necessarily my preferred location. That we respond to what's around us, and that's something that you may not be able to detect from the big data alone. You still have a need to talk to people. You can eliminate all that redundant information, those redundant questions that you might have to ask about their location, about their day-to-day movements, about the various other things. You can eliminate those questions and cut it down to one or two questions that only the customer can answer, because that's what's going on in their head. So I think that there's definitely a possibility to keep it customer-centric, but if we assume that data alone without actually talking to people can replace people, I think that's a very dangerous thing to consider.
Okay, thanks. Holly, if you don't mind, I'm going to keep it with you one more time for another question. Aren't people concerned about security to allow location triggering surveys?
Sure, some are. Many people are, but I don't think it's quite as severe as many people think. Perhaps because I work in a technology industry, I'm not the best, but I can tell you I use my location all the time. My location is attached to every photograph I take. My location is available for checking in on various social networks and things like that. I think people have become so used to location that it's really not as scary as it maybe once was. Now, given, it's not a blanket answer, because truth be told, there are many people, and especially, for example, many different cultures and so on, that are quite concerned about that. They may be worried about sharing that type of information. Maybe they do take the extra effort of shutting off their location tracking on their phone. And that's fine. There's still things you can do. It's not something to make it go away. It's ultimately something where you would want then instead to give the respondent a little bit of power and reassurance. Some basic things you can do in order to make sure you're providing that power and reassurance to, again, keep it customer-centric, obviously, again, the customer being the respondent. You want to be sure that you are responding to regional things, whether it is culture or whether it's local law. So different cultures are going to feel differently about it. Again, I think in the U.S. at least, where I'm sitting right now, I think most people are pretty okay with it. And you also want to be really transparent. Why are you collecting the data? What are you collecting? What are you going to do with it? If you give them that kind of transparency and that kind of understanding, that's going to give people so much more confidence. And then, of course, whatever you do with it, make sure, if at all possible, anonymize the data. Make sure that you're not using it for the wrong reasons. And a lot of people are going to feel very much more comfortable with that. And of course, it continues on. If you want somebody to give you something and not argue about it, you're going to have to give them something in return. And that can be anything from your incentives to even just explaining the benefit. If people understand things, sometimes they're a lot more open to providing information. We're collecting this data because this is going to help us to improve our service hours. Oh, gee, well, yeah, absolutely. Then totally follow me around for a week. It really changes the game. So it can be incentives. It could also be just what am I helping to do? Because people want to be part of growing a business. They want to be part of that. That ability to develop the brand. Other things, opting in. Obviously, that's always helpful as well. So, anything else, Dina?
Thanks, Holly. Okay, I think we have time for one more. So, Ray, we're going to close it out with you. When we do collaborative research with customers, is there a risk that we will lose the objectivity of market research?
Yes, but we lost it decades ago. We used to have a sort of a model of market research that treated people like lab rats, which was we hid the reason the market research was happening. We put in vague questions. We didn't really say how we got the information about them. We never told them what would happen with the results. And the result of that was that we went from about 70 or 80% of people being willing to take part in market research down to typical response rates now of around 10% or less. And that's because we've not engaged people and we've not collaborated with them. We just did things to people instead of doing things with people. Now, when you start to do things with people, you have to change the way you think and realize that, yes, there are going to be some compromises. There are going to be new ways that you analyze and interpret the data. You are probably going to have to make more and more of the findings available to more people. First of all, more people within the organization. But as you start to get really good at closing the feedback loop, you're going to find more and more of that information. You're going to want to report it back to people. And let people know that if they help you improve the brand, they get the benefits. It comes back to this value exchange. So it's a slightly different way of doing the process, but it's a grown-up way. It's an adult-to-adult relationship.
Great. Thank you so much, Ray and Holly. Thank you so much today for your presentation. I think it was very valuable. For anyone on the webinar, Ray and Holly's email addresses are still on the screen. We will leave it up for a few more minutes after the webinar in case you would like to contact our presenters directly. But we hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. And thank you again to Ray and Holly.
Thanks, Dina. Thanks, everybody.
Pleasure.